My choices led me through a life and death process, one I never have imagined, but one that forever changed the direction of my life. My name is David Ben Yosef, and I want to share with you my process and why it's important to trust God. I was on my way home from a date, nothing unusual. I stopped at a traffic light and just sat there waiting for it to turn green. And while I was sitting there, I heard this small but still voice, as clearly as though someone was sitting right next to me when I was clearly in the car by myself. And the voice said to me, "Do not interfere with what is about to happen next." At first, I honestly thought I was just hearing things. I didn't think much of it. Suddenly, the light turned green, and I started driving home. But I kept trying to figure out what I had just heard. I was wondering if it was just my imagination. And then I heard it again. This time it wasn't that same small, still voice when I was at the red light. It was this more stern voice. It said, "Do not interfere with what is about to happen next." And I remind you, I was not sleepy. I was not tired. I went from being fully awake to completely blacked out in just a matter of seconds. I was met by this super bright light. Now, I thought it was just a bright light, not realizing that it was actually a person. I recognized his hands because they had the whole print in both hands. I recognized his feet because it had the hole from the nail in literally in his feet. Then he wore a white robe. I was like, wow, who is this? But his face was covered. The light was just radiating off of him. I had never fully believed that heaven and hell was really a real place. I heard about them from going to church. I heard about them from people. I just thought people just trying to have a scare tactic. I knew the stories, but I never really truly believed it. But in that moment where I was, that's when I realized they were both actually real. Jesus told me, he said, there are places I had to see. And I figured to myself, what places could there possibly be? He showed me heaven. All I saw was a tall golden gate with steps behind it. Need I remind you, he had showed me that. And I was like, okay. But then he said, you come here first to be judged for the choices that you've made in your life. Then he took me to hell. I saw this fiery pit that truly looked like something out of the movies. I saw how it was continually expanding. I saw how big name churches were literally being dumped into hell. And this is when he had showed me. He said, this is where you are slated to go from the choices that you have made in your life. Those choices did not honor the Most High God. It did not honor my Father. And that's when he showed me from standing at the gates. He said, this is where you were slated to go. You could literally hear the screams. You could literally hear and smell and wonder, why would I want to come here from the choices that I've made? But not realizing, he immediately became quiet because a choice had to be made on my part. And the words that literally came out of my mouth were, I do not care what is required of me. I, David Ben Yosef, choose to live. After I said that, Jesus told me I had chosen to serve only his Father, and that I would keep my word to him. He told me I would go through a process and a journey. He said it would start off painful, very painful. It would be trying, very trying. And I would go through a lot. I thought a lot wasn't going to be that big, but he said I would go through a lot. And it would not make any sense to me why I am going through it. So he said again, He said, you will keep my word. He said, you will keep your word to my Father and serve only him. And he said, you will be reminded of the choice that you make every day. Then he put me back into my physical body. When I became conscious, the pain that I felt was so immense, I could barely breathe. I tried to move, I tried to wiggle out of my situation, not realizing I was pinned inside my car. Through the pain, I tried to calm myself down, but it was very difficult because I could barely breathe. I saw that my windshield had fallen in my car, just on my side. The dashboard had collapsed just on my side. And all that weight was pressing on my abdominal section, per the reason why I couldn't breathe very well. That's when I realized through my very windshield, I could see that I collided with a tree. My driver's side window was blown out with no strength and very little breath. I put my arm out the window and I waved. I just waved to let people know when they were passing by that I was not dead, that I was very much still alive, just barely. Hoping that someone would drive by and see and call to let someone know that, there was a person that hit a tree, but he's still alive. I was also yelling out the word help. Originally, I was just saying, help me, but not realizing that no one's going to hear me. But that's when I realized, instead of me waving out the window saying help me to people that was just passing by at nighttime, I recognized that I started speaking to God instead. I said, Father, help me. Help me. That was when I realized I had to trust him. This was when my process had started. It was when I was put back into my very body. I was crying, I was hurting, and I was wondering when, not realizing that I actually blacked out again, just from the pain, trying to wiggle out. Soon after, I was waking up by the fire department. When I opened my eyes, I saw firefighters and paramedics everywhere. They were working to assess how bad the collision was and what needed to be done. There was a paramedic positioned literally right behind my seat. I didn't know he was behind my seat. All I knew was that everyone was around me. His job was to keep me calm because I was freaking out, and to keep me awake because I kept blacking out. They said they couldn't move the vehicle off of the tree, so they had to work around it. Their first assessment was focused on my dashboard, where they tried to figure out how badly pinned I was in my with the dashboard, literally on my leg, and of course on my foot, and how bad it was holding the steering wheel in place on my abdominal wall. That same firefighter, he tried to manually lift that dashboard 3 different times. Each time he tried, he failed. He couldn't lift it because the weight that the tree physically held the dashboard in place on me. Every time it dropped, it cut deeper and deeper into my right leg, right next to my knee, sending a pain that was just truly unbearable. Then I heard them say my foot was stuck. All the while I kept blacking out. All the while I kept listening to the paramedic behind me to try to keep me calm. My foot was literally, my right foot was trapped on the gas pedal. The gas pedal penetrated my right foot, so they couldn't slide me out. I was in so much pain that I grabbed that paramedic's coat. I held on tight. I held on tight like a child holds on to their parent. And I held. And he told me, he said, you have to let me go so we can help you. Every time it dropped, I held even tighter. He literally had to take my hand off his coat so then they could actually do their job. You know, when I realized how intensified the pain was, the pain that I can't even describe at the moment, they had to figure out a way to free me from a car that was pretty much my coffin, where they still couldn't move the dashboard because the engine literally came through that firewall. And the tree, it wasn't a big tree, but it was a nice sized tree, held that vehicle locked in place. And out of my mouth, I said, what about the seat? Yeah, I remind you, I'm still pinned in the car. But I said, what about the seat? They told me it wouldn't move. Spiritually, I called out to God, realizing the situation that I was in. I called out to him and I asked him to help the seat drop because they couldn't figure out how to get the seat to drop. So I asked him, Father, can you allow the seat to drop? When they tried again, the seat literally dropped. It literally dropped back. It went backwards and they literally broke the back to get me out. You know, once that happened, my foot was free. Then they lifted the dashboard one more time and they literally pulled me out from the car wreckage that I was in. What I felt in that moment is very hard to describe, but I truly felt crushed. I've never been through something like this, but I felt crushed. I saw the ambulance lights going. They loaded me inside. It was a short drive down the street before I was transferred into a medevac helicopter. Need I remind you, I was only 5 minutes from my house. I could hear the rotor blades moving, but I was still in so much pain. All I heard was that medic on that helicopter. From the moment that it took off, from the moment that it arrived to the hospital, he said, stay with me. Stay with me. Near the end of my trip, I blacked out again. When I blacked out this last time during that flight, from all the trauma that I had endured from colliding with that tree, the time that I was underneath that dashboard, the time it took to get me out and get me free, the next thing I remembered, I woke up in the ICU in the hospital. I had a neck brace on, tubes down my mouth, tubes down my throat, and I was just staring up at the ceiling. I didn't realize from that time, my process was getting even deeper. It was going even further. I spent a total of 40 days and 40 nights hospitalized during the peak of COVID. 12 of those days, these felt like the longest days. 12 of those days were spent in the ICU. 8 surgeries were performed during this time. My pelvis had to be surgically repaired. 7 inches of my small bowel intestines was removed. My abdominal wall had to be calmed down from the trauma that it endured because it was swollen like a hot air balloon. Yeah, I had a skin graft from my right quad that went on a 3rd-degree burn on my right foot, the top of my right foot. And I didn't fully understand at that time I had even suffered a 3rd-degree burn. I had so much stuff going on. The severity that was still unfolding in ICU was immense. All the while, before I was transferred out of ICU, my very last surgery, they literally forced me shut. And in this abdominal area, they literally forced me shut because the swelling just was not going down because of the severity of the trauma that I had went through. After ICU, I spent 18 days in the burn unit. I started another level of my process. That's when everything began to slow down. It seemed like time just took a pause. As my body started healing from what it had endured, gratitude began to take root in my spirit. I truly thank God for allowing me a second chance at life, because the way I was living it, he didn't have to give it to me. He could have taken me there, but he allowed me to make a choice. And that choice is what I'm living out to this day. As you think about it, that moment humbled me. That was like a humbling beginning for me. It humbled me so deeply because it took what I knew and it removed the whole equation. What I thought was my life was not my life anymore. It was now living for the Father and only serving him. Now I could no longer tell him I didn't have time to press into him. All I had was time. Nothing but time. 24 hours of my day felt like pure eternity. I didn't know when the day started. I didn't know when the day ended. I once thought it was a myth that you don't get much sleep in the hospital. As a patient, I learned that was very much true. No such thing as sleep in the hospital. During that time, I was woken up from a nap, and I was told I needed a bedside surgery in the burn unit, all because they was looking for fluid buildup. They didn't know where it was at. When they went in via bedside surgery, numbed the area up, all they got was that it was a pocket full of gas. All the while they was looking for fluid, all they got was gas. But at that moment, reminded me how fragile and dependent the process had made me to be. After the burn unit, I tried so hard to get to rehab, and not realizing 10 days in rehabilitation was my turning point. Inpatient rehabilitation. Literally being carted in a bed to a rehabilitation wing was just humbling, because I didn't know if I was going to get there. I was already 18 days in the burn unit. That's when I realized the prayers I had been praying while in that hospital bed was answered. I wasn't watching TV. They gave me a remote to watch TV. I didn't watch TV. I stayed in his face. I stayed in his process. I did not waver. I knew I had support at home. I physically began praying for advancement into the next level of the process that he said I had to endure. Now when I say I had support at home, I had my family that was literally going through the same thing. I spent 40 days and 40 nights in a hospital. They spent 40 days and 40 nights praying for me, supporting me from home. To me, that was a big deal, because in the hospital, I felt alone. But God was by my side. Holy Spirit was by my side. The angel that took such a beating from my accident, he was by my side. I was always protected, even in the hospital. And that was amazing for me. When I went to the rehab, I didn't realize until I got there that doctors chose my case. The physical therapist, she chose my case. The occupational therapist, she even chose my case. I guess they could pick a case, because I had to learn how to walk. I had to learn how to function in day-to-day activities again. I had to learn how to trust again. It was hard being bathed by someone else. And it was hard trusting another person with that level of care, to care for you as though they're caring for their child. The hardest realization for me was understanding I had to relearn how to walk using a 4-arm supported walker, one step at a time, because I had a wrist injury. In this process of just 10 days, frustration set in heavy, mainly because visitation was limited only to 4 hours during COVID. That's 4 hours out of a 24-hour day. 20 hours I'm around people I didn't know, didn't talk to, didn't understand. I was just trying to strive to survive in my situation. What kept me grounded, though, I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I've been honest with y'all from the beginning. What kept me grounded was the consistency of prayer. I had learned that from my mother. When she came to visit me, we always closed our visitation time off with prayer. She would come in close to me and we would pray. Because you know how hard it was for me to actually speak. But I'm going to tell you this. When I came into the room from rehab, I was always tired. I felt like I had literally worked out. It was a struggle. But when my mother came for those visitations, it was like she lit up the room. And when she lit up the room, I felt happy. I felt warm. I knew that, she was there for a reason, although I haven't been home for almost 40 days. And literally the day after I was released from rehab, I had to go in and undergo my 10th and last surgery. That surgery was the one that was on my left wrist that got a plate and 3 screws in it. When I came out of anesthesia from that, they told me that if I couldn't get up, I would need to stay longer in the hospital. My parents tried to assist and help me, knowing what I went through. And I remember that they said we understood what he went through, but he still has to get up on his own. So he gave me my walker. And this is when I cried out to God. I said, Father, help me get up. As you know, it is very painful for me to get up right now, but can you help me get up? Because I don't want to stay in the hospital no more. And before I knew it, the strength came forward and I got up. I got all the way up, actually into the walker, although it was extremely painful. From a place of determination and deep desire not to remain in that environment any longer. That's what got me to stand up. The Father showed me that. He said, you have to be determined to press into me. You have to have a deep desire to trust me. That's when I thanked him again. I said, I want to just thank you. I thanked him in the car while I was crying. At that time, the process didn't yet feel victorious. All I felt still was pain. I managed pain only to be rehospitalized for another 5 days because of a wound vac hole that wouldn't heal from when I was in the ICU ward. There was a breach from my intestines. I was eating. And this is how I found it. I was eating and literally food particles were leaking out of that wound vac hole. When I went back to the hospital, I was seen by a wound vac specialist that tried her best to seal up that area, not knowing the body was trying to let her know that something's wrong in here. And right after they got it to seal up, the body opened up an additional hole, literally right below that hole. And I was like, man, I thought this one was going to heal. Not realizing it opened up on its own. But only God knew what needed to happen so that issue could be resolved. This is the one that created this body. He would know how it works because he created the body. He knew what the body needed to do to release, to get people's attention. That specific process took another 150 days. Now I'm going to take you to another level in my process. My little sister had a graduation. And at this time, I was learning how to really trust him, flow with him, no longer be in my way, but now just do everything his way. We were supposed to catch a flight, and we got stranded overnight in the airport because we missed a connecting flight leaving from home base. And I remind you, this is my first time ever being stranded in the airport. But the time that we were stranded, I had a bandage over this part right here, like literally right below my navel where the wound vac hole was. And wow. And that bandage, I didn't literally check for the entire time. I didn't know what was going on with it. I didn't know if it was pushing stuff out. We were just moving and trying to make up time. When I finally arrived to her graduation, I was exhausted. I haven't showered in a whole day. I didn't even check that wound. I didn't check the bandage. I was just moving. Stood in 100-degree heat. That was when I checked it. That was when I was able to take a shower. I had peeled it off. Realized in trusting God in that process, he sealed up this wound vac hole. I had stretched it. I thought it was, I didn't think nothing of it. I tried to stretch it. It stayed sealed. Like it swirled shut from the inside out. And I thought to myself, I said, you know what? What a process. I had told myself that when I could walk and drive on my own, I would go and visit the fire department that extracted me. I said this out in Texas. I told the Father, I said, when I get back, I'm gonna go and let them know that the person that they saved, the person that they fought for, the person that they called at the hospital, knowing that if you're not family, you can't get an update. Knowing that everything that I went through, I was going to go back and visit them to let them know that I made it. God gave me a choice. You know, it was a surprise to even see me alive. And that was when I met the guy who was trying to lift the dashboard. And honestly, I remember him to this day, because this is what they told me. They literally told me someone involved in the same type of accident before me died on impact, did not make it. Tried to get him out, never came back to life. But over time, what the Father revealed to me was simple. It wasn't my time. And I didn't understand what he said. But he told me, he said, it wasn't my time to leave just yet. Based on the choice I made to serve the Most High God, nothing else mattered to me. I wanted to live. Nothing else mattered. Whatever was required, I was willing to do it. Whatever needed to be done, I was willing to do it. Whatever came next, I was willing to do it, in spite of whatever it looked like. I wanted to live. You know, it's crazy when people see me now, they don't see someone who went through something. They don't see the year of outpatient rehabilitation to learn how to use a left hand and to hold a body weight and learn how to walk without the walker. You know, they don't see the frequent visits I had to take to fly out to see a bone specialist, where every movement was painful. Every movement. Getting on the x-ray machine, getting up and down the elevator, sitting in the wheelchair. Oh, that was a different process, but sitting in the wheelchair, you know, they don't see the 2 plates and the 13 screws that I got. 'Cause everything is under the skin, on the bone level, inside the body. They don't see if I have limitations or not. They don't see when I had to go out and get muscles reactivated. They see a man who moves freely because God allows me to move and have my being. He gets the glory from what he did for me. He gets the praise for what he's done for me. He gets the worship for what he's done for me. But if I was to leave y'all with something, I would honestly leave you with this. I remember my process. My process allows me to be grateful for everyday activities that I think I would never get. Life is a test, and life is a process. I chose to serve the Lord with joy and gladness. And I leave you with this. Heaven and hell are absolutely real. Think about that. Heaven and hell are real places. Our choices dictate where we go. Our choices dictate who we live for, who we serve. We need to look in the mirror and understand that when you serve the Most High God, those are written down. Those things our duties that we carry out here on this earth does not mean that we get an automatic exception to step into heaven. It said the righteous will barely get in. That means your choices dictate if you're going to get in. Are you living your life? Are you passing the test that life is giving you? What process are you going through? The process for Eternal Father, or the process that slates you to live it out in hell? It's a big deal. Heaven and hell is truly a real place. It took a lot for me to share my process with y'all. And as I share my process with y'all, I hope y'all make choices that honor him, that allow you to recognize that maybe I haven't been living life the way he wants me to live. Maybe I'm not serving him the way I need to serve him. And in that, we make a choice to be in the image and likeness of him and no other. Thank you.